Well, something is you're coming in, as we can tell. It's going to be 27 today, weather update. If there's a topic I keep being asked that I'm faintly surprised about as I go around, it's document assembly. And this is not a new topic. I found it quite interesting that all of a sudden something that I've been working with since the 90s is suddenly fresh and new again. And I was trying to work out what the difference really is this time. So I sat down with Adam Long from Smarter Drafter to get his view on it. Adam, I thought we'd have a chat because I get regularly asked by people out in the market about document assembly tools. These kinds of products have been around for like decades, literally decades, and yet you've put the energy into putting something new together. Was there a gap? Or was there a problem? Can you tell me a bit about?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, we didn't set out to build a software company. We set out to build a law firm.
Okay.
And we wanted to build a law firm in the future and imagine what does that look like. And maybe you take a self-driving car to a meeting, you've got access to any intelligence from around the world on tap, and you get rid of all the repetitive automated stuff. But when we looked at what was out there already, well, there were two issues. So one is most document assembly to date has been a little more than find and replace with a bit of steroids around it. So, hey, we can put some names here and some addresses here and then the rest leave to yourself. Nothing was actually at the level of delegating the drafting work to somebody else and actually having an expert take the time to do it. So the technology wasn't quite there. The other problem is that there have been tools out there for a while to build your own automated document. And it's sold with a grand vision. Like you can build your Gulfstream private jet using this tool, but the reality is the tool is a lathe and a mill and a drill press, and it's being handed to law firms saying, go and build a Gulfstream. And sure, the idea of it is great, but the reality is lawyers are so overworked as it is, they don't have time to actually do it. Now, we've taken the time to do that.
So do you think, that might not be an issue for some firms? So maybe that's about, if you have the resource for people to then take a tool set. So do you think this was informed by the size of the business that you were?
To an extent. I mean, so we've set up specifically for small and mid-sized firms that don't have knowledge management teams, and
so that's
we take that role for them. And that was a gap. That's a huge gap, especially the ones who leave top-tier firms and they're used to having that support around them to go out on their own and find that there's almost like a decay on their bank of precedents as they go out of date and are no longer relevant. To have us doing all the updates for them makes a huge difference.
The problem with having defined content though, in my experience working with law firms, was as soon as you put something in front of a lawyer, the lawyer had really strong views about whether it was their way and their style. Are they more open to, has there been a shift so that it's making them happy to go, okay, well it's worth me accepting this because I can get the job done quicker? Because that argument has always been there, but it's been really hard for them to take.
So there are two things that are happening there. And one is the fact that with the increase in competitive pressure, that they can get to their first draft, even if it's just 98% and they've still got to spend an hour adding some things around it for the particular situation. That's why we work with lawyers. They're happy to get that productivity gain by using one of these tools, even if it wasn't their content to begin with. The other thing is, what we're finding as a use case is that a lot of lawyers are using our system to do things that they're not doing that regularly, but are very high value. So we're working with, for example, suburban law firms who traditionally wouldn't do a shareholders agreement for a mum and dad business, even though a shareholders agreement would actually make their lives so much easier if ever there's a conflict. As happens in relationships. So because it's a guided process, they're doing areas of work that they might not do that often, is valuable for them, is incredibly valuable for their clients, and they know they're doing a really good job of it without having to have had a huge wealth of experience themselves doing it. So ultimately it's about drawing in expertise as needed. So no lawyer is an expert on every area of the law, and they look to delegate, they look to draw in advice, and that's exactly what these systems do. It's about pulling in expertise when you need it to do a really good job, and that doesn't necessarily require their content done their particular way.
I wonder if what we're seeing here is, when I started in technology in the 90s, I think, it was very much technology was the point. And so it was computer scientists, people coding, and it was about that. I think maybe what I'm seeing, certainly in the newer startups, is the technology is not the point. The technology is just the I hate to say platform, but it's just the wheels. And it's informed by a different level of resource. So it's you are actually providing legal content, and that might seem obvious to you, but if I look into the lathes, the product sets, it assumes that comes from outside of the product. So you have, maybe that's why this has been something for the big firms only.
Yeah, sure, but perhaps that has been in the past. So, look, I think this is where I get to come from the enviable position of not being a lawyer, looking from the outside at the legal industry. And there's this term that gets talked about in law, the legal code. Now, as an outsider, I hear the word code and I'm thinking programming, logical rules. And that's essentially what lawyers do. The code is written in the English language, they're navigating all the boundary cases and the logic. What we've done is actually work with experts in the area to map it out and turn it into machine readable code and a guided system so that you are navigating that as clearly as possible. So the shift that we're seeing is legal code is actually becoming code. And Scott Morrison, back when he was treasurer, was very clear that this was the future. He said he's looking for a time when the tax code is literal code that you can plug into your accounting system and not require a human translator to know if you're compliant. Everything should be seamless. And we'll see that shift more and more over the coming decades.
I noticed on LinkedIn you were at Alta, one of the Alta sessions recently. That's a new... can you tell me a bit about what Alta is and what kind of organisations are there?
So Alta is the Australian Legal Technology Association, and it's essentially a collaboration amongst the technology companies that are doing new things. What's very interesting is that a lot of the technology companies in Australia solve a particular problem for a lawyer really, really well. And by working together in this association, we're able to stack up those multiple solutions to build an entire suite. So whereas traditionally you might look for one company and hope that your practice management somehow does everything in the law firm, bringing in these specialist solutions that work really well together is essentially what Alta lets lawyers access by having them in the one spot.
So is it moving to, there are the one-stop shop for the core components in a law firm? There's a lot of value to that to the small to mid-sized firms. Do you think this is more about the marketplace, that there's an opening of attitude that you can say, I want to go and pull from this one, I like what Adam does or Steve does, I want to pull those things in. Do you think that's part of that shift? Yes, and
it's happening because when let's take, for example, the giants of practice management or Leap. 4,000 law firms are using Leap. How do they differentiate their service when they're all going through the exact same process? So lawyers are now looking for these specialist solutions to get their own competitive advantage. If they can get efficiency gains or quality gains or a new way of accessing customers, they are looking beyond the traditional software companies that have become the standard. Because standard means your law firm is the same as everyone else's, unfortunately.
And so I think what I'm noticing out there, the attitude, just to kind of come back to that, I remember what it was like at the start, but it certainly was very interesting. The one-stop shop world was very much about, we only just live in our world and nothing can talk to us. And what I'm noticing, I was talking to one of the really big practice management vendors at the recent OUTMA conference, and their attitude was very much, no, we're partnering and we're part of the outside world now, and that is a huge, it's a massive shift. So it's interesting to see it going from that sort of top scale. And Alta, I just was fascinated in that community.
Yeah, look, there's a real shift in approach to technology from building a walled garden and trying to keep lawyers entirely within that to realizing that for different law firms, different specialist solutions are going to be a better fit. And it's actually better if all the technology talks to each other and works together.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure.
Every time I attend events, I'm always a bit perplexed by how much stuff is given away, and I've been the person with all these gewgaws that you give out, wondering what happens to them. So Tony B, here's living evidence that there's life in your handouts after the event.